Hey there buds, and welcome back to Offbeat Bloom. We've been talking about making a personal budget, and this week that's going to focus on how we actually set goals to define what we want our budget to be. Principally speaking, there are really only three types of goals, and it has to do with how long it's going to take to achieve or how simple it's going to be. First are long-term goals, which tend to run longer than a year in terms of their initial investment or work that they take, but they're also defined by being things that are bigger investments in either yourself or the things you own. So they tend to fall into things like owning a house, saving for retirement, paying off student loans, which is one for me. Things like that happen to matter, but are going to take longer than maybe just 1 year to complete. Next are short-term goals, which can be accomplished somewhere in the neighborhood of a month to 3 months. So it might be a concert ticket, a video game, maybe on the higher end, a video game system, but that's about it. Then in the middle are the medium-term goals, and these tend to run anywhere between that kind of upper 3 to 6 months of the short-term goal and the more than a year of a long-term goal. So 6 months to a year is probably about the right measure. Medium-term goals can be things like saving up for a car, depending on the car you want, and things like vacation. Sometimes we're doing these things all at once. We're planning on buying a house in a little while, so we're saving up for that, but we've also got this vacation we want to go on. We can be doing more than one of these at a time, and in fact, when you look at those three types of goals I've already mentioned, maybe your selection is that you want excuse me. Not really sure where that came from. I'm just gonna moving on from that, the question is, where do we start in building a goal? Now let's take the example of saving up for a trip. I know for me, every year I have to do this for my trip to RTX down in Austin, which I have a lot of fun at, but it does require me to put back money well in advance to be able to have the most fun I want in terms of being able to buy things at the convention, eat a lot of the good food in town, all those sorts of things. And all of those things are going to be easier to manage once you've built your budget. It's not enough to just say, I want to go to RTX. That alone does not make it happen. We need to set a goal, and setting a goal, it requires, in many cases, a better structure, a little more detail. And that's really what we're going to walk through in the rest of this video. We're going to talk through at least one version of the structure that a lot of people use when goal setting, a thing called a SMART goal. Now, SMART in this case is an acronym, S-M-A-R-T. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Just as with a lot of the things we've talked about, it's not enough to just have a few of those characteristics. You really want to have... Okay, that's getting weird, and I don't know what's happening, but we're just going to pretend like it's not. Each of those 5 has a definition, and we're going to walk through what the definition is and what that means in terms of setting a goal, and then we'll come back around at the end to say what our specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goal for going to RTX should look like. So specific is really about the details. It's about what do you actually want to achieve. You don't just want to go to RTX. If that was the goal, buy a plane ticket, buy a badge, you're done. So that's probably not your actual goal. Your goal is to be able to go there, be able to afford the event itself, be able to afford good food maybe in the area, afford a hotel that's near the event. There are several things to consider. All of those things matter when we talk about our specific category. Next is measurable, which ends up being pretty easy when we talk about doing a personal budget, because the answer is we're going to measure it with dollars. Next is it achievable, which, since we're talking about RTX, achieve and all that. But when we talk about achievable in this context, we're talking about whether or not it can be done. And there is a degree to which, for some people, a trip like this just can't be done. Maybe there's not enough time to save up. Maybe you don't make enough to really be able to put back without cutting into other very important spend that you need to take care of. Those things are true, and they're true in all walks of life for all manner of goals that we want to set. So keep in mind that achievability is something that you kind of find out as you work through the budget. My advice on achievability is that it's something that needs to be assessed once you've completed building out the entire goal and all of the pieces to it. In our case, achievability is something we're going to know much better once we're done building our budget. So it's important now to say that we think it's achievable, but we need to go back once we finished our budget and look and say, is it really something that we can afford? Number 4, relevant. In this case, it's about how important it is to have this particular thing happen. Now, a trip to RTX is not a necessity. It's a thing that qualifies as a want, like what we talked about before. So in that case, it isn't relevant in the sense that it is necessary, but it's relevant in the sense that it's something I want to do. Relevance is a combination of how important it is, how necessary it is, but also how much it is something you want or something you would enjoy. Both of those factors matter. Relevancy, though, does take into account that if you are spending on this, you're not spending on that, how much more important is spending on that other thing? Because it may be something you really want to do, but is it relevant in place of other things you want to do? And is this the time? That's kind of the other piece of relevancy. Is now the time? I would say that depending on your budget, and you'll know more at the end of this whole exercise, but depending on your budget, it may not be relevant right now to start saving because you may think, well, it's already too late for me to save up for that event or to get the badge I want. But is it relevant to start saving up for the next one or the next event? Maybe it's PAX or some other event that you're considering going to. Those are the sorts of things that play into it being relevant. And the last one is time-bound. Time-bound is pretty straightforward. We need to be able to say by when certain goals need to be achieved. So what happens when we bring it all together? Well, we've established what we want to spend. We want to be able to spend on food and drink and merchandise. We want to be able to spend on a hotel and airfare and a badge. So we've established all of those things. So that's our specific category. How are we going to measure it? Well, we're going to look at how much we planned to spend, and then we're going to compare it to our actual spend. We're going to use dollars against dollars. Is it achievable? Well, as soon as we finish our budget, we'll know that for sure, but it seems achievable right now. Is it relevant? Well, while it's not more important than some of the other things, I think it is something that I can do in addition to the more important things I have to spend on. And is it time-bound? Yes, I've got specific deadlines along the way that are going to define my success or failure in terms of achieving this goal. And that's what it looks like when you bring it all together. When you go through all 5 of those things and say, I've got... Okay, sorry for that. I think T-Pain is in my house. I don't know where. I'll have to find him after we're done. Once you've got all of it brought together, see, I cannot say it. It's important to remember that we're using a very specific example of a once a year sort of budgeting activity where we're trying to figure out, can we go on this vacation? But in many cases, that's not the only factor to be considered. If we really stop and think about it, as we go along, we might learn new things. We might find a hotel that's cheaper than we expected. We might find that being a mile away from the convention center is great, but 2 miles wouldn't bother us either. There are other things that we can learn. So an important aspect of this whole budgeting activity is being flexible. And that's true in any goal-setting activity, not just budgets. You have to be able to flex and adjust and change your budget over time. In fact, long-term budgets especially should change over time. If only because eventually you're going to achieve some of the things you were setting out to do, and you need to figure out what's next. Is there some other goal I want to achieve? And remember, these techniques don't just apply to setting a personal budget. I've used them for a number of things. And that's it for this week's video. We've covered how long we want our goals to apply to, whether that's short-term, long-term, middle, or the other one. We've also covered how to build a SMART goal, a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Next week, we're going to talk about doing the math of taking that information and beginning to build it out and seeing how our goals apply as we try to work through that. If you like this video, the best place to follow for more is to start with Twitter, @OffbeatBloom. You can follow there. We'll post updates every time a video goes live on one of our platforms. You'll know about it because you're following right there. If you want to see these videos before anybody else, consider subscribing to our Patreon page at the $5 tier. You'll get these videos a week before they go up on our website for the public and 2 weeks before they go up on YouTube. Now, if you don't want to pay any money and you want to get these for free, the best place to go is our website. Videos go up there a week after they go up on Patreon and a week before they go up on YouTube. And you'll be able to check out things like blogs and production posts and things like that along the way as well. And if you don't want to do either of those things, please consider subscribing and turning on the notifications on YouTube and clicking like on this video. And with that, I've covered everything I wanted to cover today. We'll be back next week, and until then, bye buds.